lion doesn't concern himself with the opinions of the sheep.
Modern psychology identifies the Dark Triad: Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. Tywin embodies all three. Machiavellianism describes those who view relationships as strategic opportunities, where trust is naive and morality is merely a construct to manipulate. When Tywin orchestrates the Red Wedding, he's solving a problem. Robb Stark threatened Lannister power, so Tywin eliminated him efficiently through proxies. The violation of sacred guest right, the slaughter of hundreds at a wedding, merely unfortunate necessities in service of a larger goal. Machiavellian personalities use charm selectively, and Tywin exemplifies this: cordial with useful allies, coldly dismissive of everyone else. Narcissism manifests in Tywin as unshakable conviction in his own judgment. He doesn't see his children as individuals with their own desires. They're extensions of himself, components of House Lannister. Jaime continues the legacy. Cersei secures alliances. Tyrion is an embarrassment. This inability to recognize others' fundamental humanity is classic narcissism. What makes it particularly dangerous is how his genuine capabilities create a feedback loop. Strategic successes confirm his superiority, justifying dismissal of others' perspectives and enabling increasingly ruthless decisions without internal conflict. Psychopathy involves profound emotional detachment and inability to form genuine bonds. Tywin's marriage to his cousin Joanna appears to be the one exception. Accounts suggest genuine love, with witnesses noting he smiled in her presence. When she died, giving birth to Tyrion in 273 AC, the joy went out of him entirely. He never remarried, which could reflect genuine grief. Yet even this didn't prevent him from channeling that loss into decades of hatred for Tyrion. His treatment of Tyrion following Joffrey's death reveals his psychopathic core. Tywin knows Tyrion is innocent, but orchestrates a trial designed for conviction because it serves his purposes. The ability to condemn your own innocent son to death requires an absence of normal emotional functioning. These Dark Triad traits explain Tywin's rise from a position where his house was mocked to becoming one of the most feared figures in Westeros. Yet these same traits create blind spots. Narcissists can't accept criticism. Psychopaths fail to predict emotional reactions. Machiavellians underestimate loyalty and moral conviction. Tywin's downfall ultimately stems from his inability to understand that his children had emotional breaking points that couldn't be managed through threats alone, strategic thinking, and long-term planning. The Red Wedding reveals Tywin's strategic mastery. From a tactical perspective, Robb Stark was winning battles and proving difficult to defeat conventionally. Tywin needed a solution eliminating the threat, while minimizing his own risk and resources. By working through Walder Frey and Roose Bolton, he maintained plausible deniability while binding them to him through mutual guilt and dependence on his protection. The massacre eliminated not just Robb, but his entire command structure in a single night, achieving what conventional warfare would require months and thousands of casualties to accomplish. Strategic thinking of this caliber requires several capabilities. First, thinking multiple moves ahead, anticipating cascading effects. Tywin knew the Red Wedding would create long-term political consequences, but calculated that being feared as ruthless would serve Lannister interests despite damage to their honor. Second, information superiority. Tywin established extensive spy networks and kept his plans closely guarded. The letters coordinating the Red Wedding were sent via ravens, using secure communications for operational security. Third, separating emotion from decisions. This is where Tywin's psychopathic traits serve his strategy. Most people couldn't orchestrate such betrayal because emotional barriers would interfere. Tywin experiences none of these impediments. Research on strategic thinking shows effective strategists engage in systems thinking, practice scenario planning, and demonstrate cognitive flexibility. Tywin exhibits all these capabilities. When Joffrey proves uncontrollable, Tywin doesn't stubbornly continue supporting him. He simply assumes control. When Tyrion successfully defends King's Landing, Tywin still dismisses him, because Tyrion's value as a scapegoat outweighs his value as an asset. Ruthless pragmatism defines every calculation. Yet this strategic thinking contains inherent limitations. By viewing everything through utility and advantage, strategic manipulators fail to account for variables that can't be quantified. Human emotion, moral conviction, the limits of fear, the eventual breaking point when manipulation goes too far. Tywin's children weren't simply pieces on his board. They were human beings with emotional needs. And his failure to recognize this wasn't brilliance, but a fatal blind spot. Emotional manipulation of family. Family manipulation relies on twisting love, duty, and identity into instruments of control. Each of Tywin's children bears psychological scars, revealing the mechanics of emotional manipulation with disturbing clarity. Tyrion receives the most overtly cruel treatment. From birth, Tywin views his dwarf son as personal embarrassment. By establishing impossible standards, Tywin creates a dynamic where Tyrion constantly seeks approval he'll never receive, a classic manipulation tactic. Tyrion's brilliance should make him invaluable, but acknowledging this would require valuing something Tywin has decided to devalue. This warps Tyrion's sense of self, creating excessive drinking, self-destructive behavior, and depression, all symptoms of prolonged emotional abuse. Yet Tyrion remains desperate for his father's approval, unable to break free from seeking validation from his trauma's source. Conditional love explains much of Tywin's manipulation. Unlike unconditional love providing security, conditional love creates anxiety and dependency. Cersei experiences this devastatingly. Tywin sees her intelligence, but only values it for securing political marriages. He dismisses her governance desires, telling her she's not suited for leadership despite acknowledging her capability. This double bind, having capacity for power but being denied it, leaves her ambitious and resentful, constantly trying to prove worth through increasingly destructive means. The manipulation operates through gaslighting, making someone doubt their own reality. Cersei knows she's intelligent and capable, yet Tywin repeatedly tells her she's wrong. Her judgment is flawed. This creates cognitive dissonance, damaging her ability to trust her own judgment, leading to swings between grandiose confidence and paranoid insecurity. Jaime's manipulation takes another form, idealization becoming its own trap. As the golden son receiving approval, he seems privileged, but this approval comes with chains. Tywin's entire vision rests on Jaime leaving the Kingsguard, returning to Casterly Rock, marrying and producing heirs. Jaime's desires don't matter. This represents making victims feel responsible for the manipulator's dreams. Tywin frames this as obligation rather than control. Jaime should want to serve House Lannister. Any resistance becomes selfishness. Any pursuit of his own path becomes betrayal. Tywin employs triangulation, playing family members against each other. When wanting Jaime to leave the Kingsguard, he offers to spare Tyrion, using one son to control another. He uses emotional blackmail, framing demands as family legacy rather than personal desire, making individual desires seem like selfish betrayal. Most destructively, he uses invalidation, consistently dismissing others' feelings. When Cersei expresses frustration, he dismisses it as irrelevant emotion. This teaches his children their feelings don't matter, their perceptions can't be trusted, their worth depends on external validation. The long-term damage is severe. Children raised with conditional love, constant criticism, and invalidation develop complex trauma affecting their entire lives, struggling with self-worth, difficulty in relationships, becoming manipulative themselves, or swinging between people-pleasing and explosive rebellion. Tywin creates these exact patterns in all three children, the fatal flaws and legacy. Tywin's first flaw was pride, profound overestimation of his control. He mastered external variables, but failed to account for internal ones, emotional states, personal limits, human needs. His underestimation of Tyrion proved literally fatal. Tywin believed fear and duty would keep Tyrion controllable, failing to recognize limits to how far you can push someone. By putting Tyrion on trial for murder, he didn't commit. By sleeping with Tyrion's lover Shay, by years of relentless abuse, Tywin pushed past the point where normal incentives could maintain control. When Tyrion found him on that privy with a crossbow, the years of manipulation reached their logical conclusion. Research shows abuse victims often remain trapped by fear or hope things will improve. But there's typically a breaking point where motivation shifts from avoiding consequences to simply making the pain stop. Tywin couldn't conceive anyone would choose certain death over continued submission, a failure of imagination stemming from his psychopathic inability to understand emotional experience. Tywin's treatment of Cersei created another disaster. By simultaneously praising and denying her power, he cultivated a dangerous, insecure leader who would destroy House Lannister from within. After his death, Cersei tried ruling through fear and manipulation like him, but lacked his strategic patience and ability to distinguish necessary ruthlessness from self-defeating cruelty. This reveals manipulative leadership's second flaw. It doesn't build sustainable systems. Tywin maintained power through personal capabilities, but failed developing those capabilities in others because doing so would require acknowledging them as potential equals. When he died, everything built on fear of him quickly collapsed. The Red Wedding demonstrated critical limitations. It eliminated military threats efficiently, but destroyed the sacred trust of guest right. Fear maintains order only to a point. Beyond that, it creates desperate enemies with nothing to lose. Once guest right could be violated for political advantage, no alliance was secure. The order he tried creating through fear was actually fragile chaos held together by terror. Tywin's narcissism meant he surrounded himself with sycophants or enemies, no real advisors whose counsel he valued. This created an echo chamber where assumptions went unchallenged and biases reinforced. The psychology of power reveals this common trap. As people gain power, they receive less honest feedback and become less receptive to feedback they do receive. This creates a dangerous loop where increasing power leads to decreasing self-assessment accuracy, leading to greater strategic errors undermining that power. Perhaps his deepest flaw was misunderstanding what creates lasting legacy. Tywin believed fear and respect would ensure prominence for generations, but legacy isn't built on fear. It's built on foundations outlasting individual lives. By his death, House Lannister was feared, but also isolated, hated, dependent on a single aging man. His children were psychologically damaged, his alliances based on coercion, his methods created enemies pursuing vengeance across generations. Within years, the house he built was destroyed, not by conquest, but by internal rot his methods created. This represents the ultimate irony. Tools providing short-term power often undermine long-term stability. Fear motivates only while its source remains credible. Manipulation works only until people realize they're manipulated. Control through emotional abuse creates psychological damage, eventually manifesting as rebellion or collapse. In trying to make House Lannister invincible, Tywin made it brittle, strong under pressure, but likely to shatter if struck at the right point. Tywin's legacy, not the powerful dynasty he envisioned, but 3 broken children, a destroyed house, and a cautionary tale about manipulation's limits. He demonstrated that intelligence, strategic thinking, and ruthless pragmatism achieve extraordinary results. But he also demonstrated that these qualities, divorced from empathy or genuine connection, ultimately consume themselves. The most chilling aspect is recognizing these patterns exist in our reality. The tactics Tywin used, emotional manipulation, conditional love, gaslighting, triangulation, strategic ruthlessness, appear in families, workplaces, and relationships worldwide. Understanding how manipulation works helps us identify and resist it. Tywin remains fascinating because he's such a perfect embodiment of Dark Triad psychology in action, showing manipulation at its most skilled and strategic. Yet his fate reminds us that being a perfect manipulator doesn't make you invincible. It makes you effective until the moment it makes you vulnerable. And that vulnerability, when it arrives, is often absolute. As you drift towards sleep, consider the line between effective leadership and toxic manipulation. Tywin showed us what happens when that line is crossed so completely that manipulation becomes an art form. He also showed us where that path leads, not to lasting legacy, but to isolation, hatred, and an ignoble end in the most undignified of places. Before you drift off, remember to like and subscribe if you found this exploration of psychological manipulation informative. These deep dives into the darker aspects of human psychology help us understand not just fictional characters, but the patterns that shape our own world. Sweet dreams, and may your relationships be free from the manipulation that destroyed House Lannister from within.